Okay, this is Utah Middle School Math Project 2.2C, where we're looking at the rules for division. To get started, let's briefly explain and review why a negative multiplied by a negative is a positive. That's your quick poll. I want you to think about that, write down your response, and then continue the recording. All right, briefly explaining why a negative times a negative is a positive. I think the best brief explanation is explaining that the opposite of groups of negative numbers. So understanding, come on, there we go. Negative can be said as negative, but it also can be said as the opposite. And so if I have groups of negative numbers, that's all going to be negatives. But if now I have the opposite of that, that means I'm going to have the opposite of negatives, which is positive. That's the best brief explanation. Hating hate is fine, but mathematically speaking, I like that consideration of opposites. There's some review. Opposite is key. Hating hate, loving love, those are other great ways that you can remember some of these rules. We acted it out, we walked and rewound and fast forward. Those can also be helpful ways to remember this. But what I want to do now is I want to talk about integer division. Again, today we are talking about integer division, Utah Middle School Math Project 2.2C. And to make sense of division with integers, we're going to rearrange some multiplication problems. So we have a multiplication problem here. It's a missing factor. You guys might remember kind of the fact families of younger grades, where you can write 3 times 6 is equal to 18, and you can rearrange that to be 6 times 3 is 18. You can also completely rearrange it to a division problem. 18 divided by 3 is 6, and 18 divided by 6 is 3, right? Does that ring a bell, those fact families? That's basically what we're doing here. We're just rearranging these multiplication problems that have something missing, turning them into division problems. So 3 times something is 12. What could that something be? If we rearrange it, it might help us. 3 times something is 12. I think you know that the answer would be 4, right? That's what's missing. So when I rearrange it, it also confirms that 12 divided by 3 is indeed 4. But we can do that rearranging to help us find the answer instead of knowing the answer and using it to rearrange the problem. You can think of it both ways. What about the next one? Something times 6 is 42. What would that something be? Something times 6 is 42. Thank you, Carter. 7. So I can rearrange this problem. 7 times 6 is 42. I can rearrange that to be 42 divided by 6, which would be 7. Now, this is nothing new yet. These are positives, positives, positives. Nothing new or interesting there. But now, number 3, we've got a negative in there. A negative 9 times some number is equal to a negative 72. I don't want us to rearrange this yet. I want us to figure out what should go here. Negative 9 times something is a negative 72. Talk with your groups real quick. Just make sure you all agree. Okay, and of course you all agree that it's negative 8 because negative 9 times negative 8 keeps it negative 72. Yes, Devin? Are you sure? Because I like, if it's positive times positive, it's positive. Negative times negative, surely it's going to be negative, right? But why? Remember our warm-up? This is where you can bring up that warm-up and convince me that I'm wrong. Joshua? Good. And a positive times a negative would be a negative, but now when we come back to the opposite of that, then that would have to be positive. So in order to fix this, I would need to keep it positive, right? Okay. I was just making sure you are all awake and paying attention, more awake than I was at least. Negative 9 times 8 is negative 72. So when I rearrange this, negative 72 divided by negative 9, we're just taking the same information and rearranging it, we get 8. Interesting, isn't that? A negative divided by a negative ended up being positive. Is that really that strange? Not when we think back, right? Let's see if we can continue to work through the rest of these. Number 4, negative 7 times something is 56. Don't try and rearrange it yet. Just a negative 7 times something is 56. What would that have to be, Oren? Negative 8. Okay, now I'm really confused because the last time I thought it was negative and you said it's positive, and now a negative times a negative is a positive. Oh, wait, yeah. Review, right? Because it's the opposite. Negative, negative. Hey. Okay. Yeah, I'm good. So 56 divided by negative 7, rearranging, we know that's equal to a negative 8. Interesting. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. Are we surprised by that? I hope not. 5, 6, 7, and 8 with your group. See if you can figure those out. Going to pause the recording as students work ahead and work on these ones. Ready, set, go. Something times negative 3 is equal to 15. Negative 5, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So when I rearrange this, how are we going to rearrange this? It could be either way, honestly. 15 divided by negative 3 is negative 5, but you also could have done 15 divided by negative 5 is equal to negative 3. Let's review that. A positive divided by a negative is equal to a negative. Even if we rewrote it this way, a positive divided by a negative is a negative. Something times 4 is negative 48. What is that something? Go ahead, just call it out. Yes, negative 12, in unison there. Negative 12 times 4 is negative 48. So when I rearrange that, what's it going to be? Negative 48 divided by, we could say, negative 12. And that's going to be equal to a positive 4. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. What if I wrote it differently and I said negative 48 divided by 4? That would have to be equal to negative 12. Does that change our way of thinking at all? A negative divided by a positive is a negative? Still makes sense, right? Okay. Negative 9 times something is negative 36. What needs to go here? Trace 4. Yes, I should have had you guys just call out. Negative 9 times 4 is equal to negative 36. I can rearrange this now. What goes here? Good, negative 36. A negative 36 divided by a negative 9 is a positive 4. And call out here, something times negative 8 is 88. What is that something? Great. Ooh, is it negative 11? Is it 11? Yeah, it has to be negative because a negative times a negative is the positive. So how am I going to rearrange it here? 88 divided by negative 11 is negative 8. Or you could have done 88 divided by negative 8 is negative 11. Math practice 7. Make use of structure. How could you use the related multiplication problems to find each quotient, explain, and then state the quotient? So here are these quotients. We're not doing related multiplication problems. But can you use the structure of multiplication and division to figure out if the answer is going to be a positive or a negative? That's what I want you to try. Go ahead and work on 9 through 12 with your groups, and then we'll talk about it. With your groups, ready, set, go. 12 divided by negative 3 is equal to negative 4. What I could have done to answer that is I could have written a multiplication problem. Negative 3 times some number that I don't know is equal to 12. What would that number have to be? A negative times a negative is a positive. And same type of thing here. I can rearrange this to be a multiplication. Negative 2 times some number that I don't know is equal to a negative 8. What is that going to have to be? A negative times something is a negative. It's going to have to be a positive. So negative 8 divided by negative 2 is equal to a positive 4. How are you guys doing so far? Doing all right? Okay. 40 divided by negative 10, that's going to be a negative 4. So we could have written it as negative 10 times some number that I don't know yet is equal to a positive 40. A negative times a negative is how I get a positive, so that's how I arrived at that -4. And I see a pattern here, -4, 4, -4, so this one obviously is 4, right? Okay, just making sure you're paying attention. It's actually 8. Rewriting that, we could have written -12 times some number that I don't know is equal to a -96. And a negative times a +8 would have to be a -96. So what are the rules for dividing integers? Have you noticed any patterns yet? Do you need to discuss with your groups? Let's discuss. What are the rules for dividing integers based on what we've seen? A positive divided by a negative, what do we get? A negative divided by a negative, what do we get? A negative, no, let's see, let's go to another one. Negative divided by a positive, what do we get? What are those rules for dividing integers? With your groups, just a quick conversation. We're going to pause the recording. Ready, set, go. What are those rules? What are the rules for dividing integers? I want to see some hands. Thank you. Let's go Joshua. Exactly. The exact same as multiplication. A negative times a negative is a positive, so a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Yeah. So I think that the best, easiest way to summarize what the rules are, they're the same as they are for multiplication. So if I want to be really clear, we can rewrite what all of those are. We're going to do it still very briefly. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. And a positive divided by a positive, which you've been doing since 3rd grade, is still going to be a positive. We forget that we've been doing integer division all this time just because everything has been positive up until now. But now when we take into consideration these negatives, make sure you pay attention to how those rules might change, but they're the same as multiplication. All right, and now technically this is homework, but if you take a look at all the things that I have for homework, and it keeps on going, and it keeps on going, I want us to practice some of this in class, even though technically it's all part of homework. And the part that I want to skip ahead to, I'm going to have you guys practice a couple of these find quotients. So let's just agree, let's do 1, 2, 3, and 4 right now in class. And then I want to spend the rest of the time that we have, I want to do some of these story problems together. The reason why there's so much today is because tomorrow we review and Friday we test. So yes, there's extra problems, but it's extra problems to help you practice. So with your groups, please do 1 through 4. And if you want, get a head start on those problems. We're going to be talking about those next, those story problems, 15 through 18. Okay, pausing the recording, ready, set, go. Time to check your answers. 12 divided by a -4 is equal to a -3. -36 divided by let me try that again. -36 divided by -6 is equal to a +6. 21 divided by 3 is equal to 7. Positive divided by a positive is a positive. And -45 divided by 9 is equal to a -5. How'd you guys do so far? Good. All right, now let's jump to the stories. Write a division expression for each situation. Here's the key things that I want to see. If it's a negative situation, like owing money, I want to see negative numbers. Okay, that's one of the areas that we struggled with on our quiz, so I want to make sure that we can make that correction now in time for our test. And just like before, answer the question in a complete sentence. So, Keith borrowed a total of $30 by borrowing the same amount of money from 5 different friends. How much money does Keith owe each friend? How are we going to write an expression for this? $30 borrowed, is that going to be positive or negative? That's negative. So $30 borrowed, I'm going to start with a -30. And he borrowed the same amount of money from 5 friends. So that amount of money divided by 5. The friends aren't negative. The friends are positive. -30 divided by 5. And -30 divided by 5 is equal to -6, exactly, -6, which makes sense because he is owing $6 to each friend. So the answer, Keith owes $6 to each friend. I am also going to educate you on different ways that we can write this. I know you've seen it before, but it's going to come up on your review and on your test, so I want to make sure that you've really truly seen it recently. We don't always have to write division this way. In fact, this way of writing division is a very elementary sort of way. We can write it as, nope, not even a slash, we're going to write it as a fraction. -30 divided by 5. Please understand that those mean the exact same thing. Okay? Let's try the next one. The temperature fell 12 degrees over 4 hours. What was the average change in temperature per hour? If the temperature is falling 12 degrees over 4 hours, falling, we need to represent that with a -12. And it happens over the course of 4 hours, so we can divide by 4. What was the average change in temperature per hour? -12 divided by 4 is equal to -3. As a complete sentence, we would say the temperature dropped or fell 3 degrees per hour. All right, and you get to complete 17 and 18, those stories on your own. I will let you skip 3 and 4 on the spiral review, just because they're not relevant and I've already assigned enough extra stuff that we don't need to worry about doing 3 and 4. 1, 2, and 5 are just integer review, so it's okay to do 1, 2, and 4. Or sorry, 1, 2, and 5. And yes, there's a lot of extra ones here as well. On this one, this is the part that's going to take some time. Do you guys have this on your page? Okay, this is the part that's going to take some time. If anything, I would rather you focus your time here. This is going to help prepare you for your test more than anything else. That being said, we also should be practicing some of the division stuff. Okay? Just like usual, my time limit, stop doing homework after 20 minutes. Put in an honest 20 minutes worth of work tonight on this math assignment. I would be willing to bet that in 20 minutes you'll probably finish. Would you guys agree? Okay, if you're still working after 20, then stop no matter where you're at. But 20 minutes of good solid work. And yeah, the rest is homework because it's time to get cleaned up. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.